he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
What's going on, guys? It's Mario Man Tales 100 back here with another episode of How's My Team. We've got a bit to talk about. Obviously, we've got the Liverpool men's team, obviously in a big clash against Aston Villa, while the women's team obviously played their last game of the season against Arsenal. The Giants obviously fly over to the west to play West Coast in Perth. The Titans playing in Magic Round at Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane against the Knights. Obviously, got to talk about the Cubs and obviously their week in the series against the Braves and the White Sox, and maybe even dive into a little bit of the Brewers series because that might carry over to the next week as well. But we've got that. Obviously, got the A-League semi-finals. Obviously, Auckland and Adelaide, and Sydney and Newcastle Jets, and obviously the grand final in the A-League women's competition. Obviously between Wellington Phoenix and Melbourne City. Melbourne City being at home, obviously because they were premiers. So huge week of stuff to talk about. A whole lot of stuff to talk about, obviously in terms of games. Might even dive into a little bit in the Stanley Cup as well, in the hockey, but won't dive into it too much. Obviously the Stanley Cup final is probably not until at least the end of next week, if not start of the week after. So we'll get into that when we get into that. But yeah, a few things to talk about. Obviously, let's get started. Alright, let's start with the Liverpool men. Obviously, they played, it's Saturday morning. They played very early this morning, 5 a.m. My time. So, very early game for us in particular in terms of the week, apart from obviously Champions League games during midweek and all that type of stuff. But obviously, we've got a few things to talk about, obviously, with the Premier League, as we'll do in the miscellaneous stuff, obviously with the table shifting up and down. But Liverpool, obviously, final away game of the season against Aston Villa. Huge clash, top 5 clash. Obviously, Liverpool being in 4th position going into this game, Aston Villa being in 5th. And it was a 4-2 loss away from home against Aston Villa for Liverpool. And very disappointing result when I seen this morning. And it was 1-0 at half-time Aston Villa's way. So literally we didn't lead pretty much the entire game. So we'll say they did score in the 42nd minute to go up 1-0 at half-time. Then Virgil van Dijk, obviously with a great cross from Dominic, crossed it. Virgil van Dijk got clear of the defence, headed it into the goal in the 52nd minute. And then like 3 minutes later, Dominic ends up slipping in the defence, which makes a break for Aston Villa. Very much like Steven Gerrard against Chelsea, which obviously gave the title away on that day in particular. And obviously a few passes were stringed. Ollie Watkins ended up scoring in the 57th minute because of that. So literally we were up and tied it up at 1, and they scored literally in 5 minutes later. So not ideal. Ollie Watkins ended up getting a brace. He scored a double with his second goal in the 73rd minute, and then John McGinn scored in the 89th minute, and we scored in the 2nd minute from Virgil van Dijk again in the 2nd minute stoppage time before full time, giving us the score of 4-2. So not ideal for Liverpool. That's 3 losses on the bounce in terms of results in the Premier League, and pretty disappointing, especially considering Aston Villa have actually got technically bigger fish to fry in other competitions. And I say that because obviously they got a Europa League final coming up. I believe it's either on Wednesday or on Thursday, my time, but it's midweek coming out of this game. So ultimately they're going to have a bit of momentum obviously going into that game. but their focus is going to be entirely on that. But it's been a pretty disappointing last couple of weeks. Obviously, May itself has been pretty disappointing in terms of results. Obviously, the Chelsea game was not that bad, but obviously considering that they scored, and literally we could have lost that game as well, obviously just due to the VAR call, obviously calling offside. So it could have actually been 2-1 Chelsea's way, and would have been 3 losses on the trot. So literally out of points that we got from these 3 games, we've only got one point, one singular point throughout the games in May, which makes obviously the encounter against Brentford next week on Monday all that more enticing on the final day, because right now, in terms of the table, we're in 5th position right now. We dropped from 4th to 5th, obviously with Aston Villa winning. Obviously they're on the same amount of points as us, so they jumped us with points difference. But obviously we still have the goal difference in our favour. So if we do win against Brentford next week and Aston Villa lose, obviously they play Manchester City on the final day. So that makes it all the more enticing, especially after a Europa League final for them midweek. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. Obviously at this point in time, Man City have played that extra game against Crystal Palace midweek. They did win that game 3-0. So, in fact, they put their goal difference in front by 1 as well and cut the deficit of points to 2 points again. Obviously, same amount of games played for Arsenal and Man City at this point in time in terms of recording. Obviously, the Liverpool and Aston Villa game was actually the first game of the week. But obviously, with Man City, they played this weekend against Chelsea. And then I believe they play on, I think it's either on Tuesday or on Wednesday my time. Man City will play Bournemouth, and I think Chelsea plays the day after, I think, in their game as well. Which obviously for them is Tottenham. So that is a big couple of clashes coming up. Obviously West Ham also, I believe, have Newcastle this week coming up, and Arsenal have Burnley as well this weekend. So we'll see how the race ends up shaping up probably towards the end of this week, obviously with the miscellaneous stuff, and we'll be recording some stuff on Monday because obviously the Titans play on Sunday, to play tomorrow, and the Giants also play tomorrow, as well as obviously overnight Liverpool women will be playing tonight. So I'll be recording a lot on Sunday, tomorrow, obviously with the Liverpool women to see how they go, and obviously recording on Monday as well. So I'll obviously give you an updated table at the time on recording on Monday. Obviously all the games would not have been played by that, but obviously we'll have obviously talk on the FA Cup final as well, with Man City playing against Chelsea in that game. But there's a lot of games going on right now, and there's a lot of movement in the table. But yeah, Liverpool obviously coming off a really, really bad loss there. Arguably, it's probably worse loss than the Man United game. At least with the Man United game, at least it was close. It was 3-2, and Man United didn't play and didn't actually score until like the last couple of minutes of the game, maybe like the last 10 minutes. If memory serves me right, 77 minutes, so still a healthy length of time. But at least with that, they're kind of kept in contention. And in fact, actually, obviously they went up 2 goals, then obviously conceded 2 goals, and then I'm talking about Man United. Man United went up 2 goals. They conceded 2 goals early in the second half, and then obviously scored the go-ahead goal. But yeah, pretty disappointing from Liverpool. Obviously, this month's been always going to be a difficult one. But you know, at this point in time, we're in a Champions League spot. Obviously, if Bournemouth do win against Manchester City, they will be only 1 point behind Liverpool. So if Aston Villa do finish above Liverpool, obviously with Aston Villa, they don't actually have to win against Man City. They can actually lose that game because if they do win the Europa League and finish in 5th, they do open up another spot. 6th spot will be open for Champions League football, which means that 7th obviously will be for Europa League and 8th will be for the Conference League. So at this point in time, if Aston Villa was in 5th, obviously they're in 4th right now, so it'd only be Arsenal, Man City, Man United, Aston Villa and Liverpool obviously going to the Champions League. Bournemouth would be in the Europa League and Brighton would be in the Conference League. If Aston Villa do lose on the final day against Manchester City and Liverpool win against Brentford, obviously Liverpool would jump them, and especially because obviously it would be goal difference would be a lot better. Obviously it's +4 in our favour right now, so obviously if Aston Villa lose, obviously it'll be at least one more added on to that. Obviously in terms of not counting what Liverpool actually scores. So there'll actually probably be 6 difference at least as a minimum in that if Liverpool do win and Aston Villa lose. But if Villa win the Europa League and do lose against Manchester City, Bournemouth will get a spot in terms of where they are right now. Then Brighton would be in the Europa League and Brentford would be in the Conference League right now. So you can see why that's a big change in terms of Aston Villa finish 4th compared to Aston Villa finishing 5th and winning Europa League instead. So lots to talk about. Obviously, big game against Brentford, obviously at home at Anfield. So hopefully it's a big turnout. Obviously it's Mo Salah's last game, Danny Robertson's last game as well. So we'll see what happens with that, but it's going to be a very big situation for the club as well. Obviously, with 2 of the big names going out, so hopefully we can send them out as winners in that game in particular. Obviously, Brentford, not the easiest opponent. Obviously, in terms of them, they're in 8th position right now. They still have a chance to get into obviously the top 6, but it is one of those things where right now they're not. But they're a few points away. They're 8 points away right now before obviously playing their game. But they can close in to 5 points behind 5th. But obviously they're wanting that 6th or 7th or 8th position. They want to consolidate that spot. Because obviously with Chelsea and Everton behind them by 2 points, kind of breathes down their neck a little bit if they don't perform obviously in their game this week, because obviously they play Liverpool next week. So all to play for in terms of the league, in terms of avoiding relegation, winning the league, Champions League qualification, and obviously European football qualification as well. Lots of things going on. But yeah, 4-2 loss for Liverpool against Aston Villa at Villa Park. Not ideal in terms of starting the week on a down note, but we'll see if the other results kind of hamper it up a little bit. Hopefully we can get some wins, especially even Liverpool, because obviously I will actually mention this before, because it was in the news, if I can find there it is. Gemma Bonner and Gemma Evans will be departing from the women's teams. So I'm just saying that now. I know we're talking about the men, but obviously we'll talk about the women next, but I don't want to forget on that. I'm not sure if they're both retiring or they're both just, looking out for other teams to play for. Obviously, there's a lot going on in terms of the teams in the WSL. Obviously, Sam Kerr, after she finishes the last game with Chelsea, she'll be gone from there. She might be heading over to the States to play in the MLS women's competition and playing with the women there. There's a few players. There was one from Arsenal. There was an Australia player. I think it was Talia Gori, something like that. She's debating on coming back to the A-League women's competition as well. So there's a lot of movement going on in the women's game right now, especially with big players moving all around and all that type of stuff. So we'll see what happens with that. But obviously 4-2 loss for Liverpool away from home at Villa Park in the last away game of the season. Alright, Sunday morning, and if you hear aeroplanes and aeroplanes flying around in the sky, I apologise in advance. They have like an air show type of situation this weekend, so didn't hear it obviously yesterday morning, which is weird, but obviously didn't start relatively early, I guess, but you'll hear aeroplane. Obviously can't do anything about that. Obviously I could record this tomorrow, but I don't really want to. I want to record a whole bunch of stuff tomorrow, and plus obviously recording some more segments for this How's My Team episode. Obviously talking about like the Titans and the Giants and that. So we'll dive into that obviously tomorrow to get that all ready. But obviously Liverpool women played last night. They played at 10 p.m. So I was actually finishing work just after the game started. Last game of the season, obviously against Arsenal, big clash, and it was a 3-1 loss at home at Anfield against Arsenal. Though what I will say is that Liverpool actually won the second half. It was 3-0 at half time, so he ended up only scoring the only goal of the second half and got it back to within 2, but unfortunately they just couldn't get over the hump. Wasn't a great sequence in the first half. Literally in like 18-19 minutes they scored 3 goals. First in the 21st minute, then in the 32nd minute, and then from Rosso, obviously one of the England players, obviously big player in the World Cup a few years ago when it was here in Australia and New Zealand. For the women's team, she scored in the 37th minute. Excuse me. She scored in the 37th minute. So, yeah, 3 down at halftime. Lots happened around that. Obviously, a lot of substitutions. 1 yellow card before halftime for Arsenal. And Zara Shaw ended up scoring the only goal for Liverpool in the 74th minute. Obviously, she was the goal scorer who just returned from an injury in the FA Cup quarter-final to obviously score that goal to get into the semis, which obviously was against Brighton. Obviously got that goal for us, thankfully. But yeah, so unfortunate result. A lot of other results kind of went our way as well in terms of the table, because it's with the final table, obviously everybody playing yesterday in the competition. We finished in 11th. So second last, 8 points away from Leicester City, who obviously were in that relegation spot. Again, I haven't researched on what the relegation situation is, whether it's 2 teams or 3 teams from the second league play against Leicester City and then obviously play in the playoff situation. I'm not sure. But notable results, Tottenham won over Brighton. Obviously Brighton probably had a big week last week, obviously with winning obviously the FA Cup semi-final and obviously playing midweek as well against, I believe, Arsenal. London City ended up getting a win over Aston Villa. They were behind 1-0. It ended up being 2-1. Chelsea, Sam Kerr in a final game at Chelsea. We only knew about that a few days ago, actually. So in terms of recording this, actually a lot of things have changed. But she ended up scoring her last game. Chelsea won 1-0. Obviously, another player, Millie Bright, who's obviously the captain of the Chelsea squad, that's obviously been absolutely dominating. She happily retired around this game as well. So obviously they've got a few teams, few members of their team kind of going in and out and leaving. Everton ended up winning 1-0 as well. And then despite obviously West Ham being up against Manchester City won 4-1 despite obviously having the competition all sewn up the week before. So it ended up being, in terms of the table, Man City on top with 55 points, Arsenal in second with 51, Chelsea in third with 49, then fourth position Man United, 5th position Tottenham, 6th position is London City. So considering that this team was promoted in the Women's League last year, being in the middle of the competition ladder is actually pretty impressive from a team that's promoted. Obviously 27 points to their name as well, which is great. Man United on 40, Tottenham on 36, then 27 for London City. Brighton dropped to 7th, obviously, with the loss, 26 points. Everton in 8th with 23. Aston Villa in 9th with 20. West Ham with 19 in 10th. Liverpool in 11th with 17. And Leicester City down the bottom in 12th position with 9 points. Not ideal, but had a feeling that a big result was coming against us there. It was always going to be a tough game regardless. Sorry, I'm just getting scores from the Cubs game, so not ideal. By that reaction, then we'll talk about that, obviously, the miscellaneous stuff. But it was always going to be difficult, even with Arsenal not having a situation to win the league, to stay in the top 3. Obviously, to stay in second position, they wanted to really push on. And it's one of those things where they're ultimately going to be in a bad situation anyway. But, we could say that ultimately when it comes down to it, the Liverpool's women's team, obviously at the start didn't play relatively well. After the transfer window, we actually started playing a lot better and ended up getting like a majority of our points, especially in 2026 portion of the season. It's just one of those things where obviously Liverpool, the women's team really has been dominated. Obviously, Man City did end up winning the league, but it's the first time in 8-9 years since they last won it. So I actually do have the picture for it, so let me get that up. So the last time they won it was 2016, so it's been 10-11 years since they last won it. Chelsea obviously 6 in a row. Arsenal in 2019. Liverpool's won 2. They won back-to-back in 2013-2014. So it's been a while since Liverpool have won the league in the women's competition. But obviously broke up that Chelsea hold on the top spot. And all power to them because they played relatively well, Manchester City. So it's not like completely out of our hands, but obviously just got dominated in a lot of games earlier this season and just kind of didn't turn things around relatively quickly, and it was an issue obviously for this team, but they ended up getting some points out of it. Obviously some runs in the FA Cup also definitely helped as well, with in terms of players obviously playing for this team, because I don't think there's too many. Obviously there's the two ladies that are leaving Liverpool, obviously after this season was done. But apart from that, we've got some nice prospects coming up. Obviously Zara Shaw, obviously returning from injury as well, especially considering it's an ACL that kept her out. She's probably going to be playing well. Enderby is also going to be at the team as well. There's going to be a few players obviously in and around, apart from obviously if people get transferred and stuff like that, obviously during the off season or during the season when it starts anew in a few months' time. But ultimately, there's not much that we can do about it. Obviously, not in that relegation situation, which is great. But hopefully, Liverpool can do a little bit better. 3-1 against Arsenal at home as well, which kind of sucks considering that, obviously Arsenal's come to our home ground and have belted us. But considering both teams, there's a 2-goal loss for both the men and the women. So not really surprising. It's 7-3 against Liverpool. So not an ideal start to the weekend, but hopefully results do get better. All right, Monday morning. I don't know how to feel, honestly. We're going to talk about the Titans, obviously Magic Round. at Suncorp Stadium. Obviously, everybody being in Brisbane, all the teams playing there, apart from obviously Canberra this year, but obviously they'll be back next year, obviously with the addition of Perth Bears, obviously the combined team of obviously the city of Perth and obviously North Sydney going over there. They'll be added to Magic Round next year, so obviously it'll be 9 games next year compared to 8, and obviously one team being on the bye, because obviously we have 17 teams in the competition right now. Obviously it'll go up to 18 next year, so we'll have an extra addition next year, but obviously all the teams would be there playing. Obviously last resort for Origin teams as well. Obviously we got the announcements of both sides for Origin 1 in terms of the men's this morning, and we'll get to that eventually, but Titans obviously playing the first game on Sunday against the Knights, a game that probably looked like could have had a situation of a possible win, and it ended up being a 36-12 loss to the Titans. Though I will say, it was 6-all at half-time, so that was as close as we got. We actually even scored first as well, which makes things worse for us in that instance, because Oliver Pascoe scored very early in the second minute, and then obviously they did score, I think, through Fletcher Sharp in late in the first half. I didn't obviously see that. He scored in the 26th minute. I was on my way to work when that happened, so I didn't see that try go through. Obviously, seen the notification, obviously, that it was 6-all at half-time. There was opportunities in the first half as well, in terms of watching the highlights video as well, of the Titans being on the line or breaking, getting a line break, and obviously dropping the ball a decent amount. So it could have been up by a couple of tries as well. Obviously the AJ Brimson no try could have went either way as well. Just obviously Dane Gagai did get his hand down first, but very, very close in that result as well. And then the Knights just went on a tear. The 45th minute, the 51st minute, then obviously Curtis Moran ended up scoring the last try for us of the game in the 56th minute. Then they scored in the 61st, the 66th, the 68th, and the 72nd minute, with 4 conversions from 7 from Kalen Ponga, and obviously Jaden Campbell kicked the 2 conversions on our side as well. Pretty average performance, honestly. 51 to 49% possession in the favour of the Knights, but our completion rate 63% compared to 79% for the Knights. Some of that completion rate obviously would be from the first half, I'd say, from the Knights as well, in terms of negative. Should be. Bit tired today, didn't sleep great. Kick defusal 50% for the Titans, 56% for the Knights. Effective tackles, 87% each. 17 errors compared to 13 for the Titans. 3 penalties conceded compared to 6. Obviously, the 6 being in the favour of the Knights. 2 ruck infringements in the case of the Knights, 1 for the Titans, and then 1 on report from the Knights as well. But pretty average performance, I will say. I can't really sugarcoat it. A lot of players didn't play up to their strengths at all, and I think a lot of questions need to be asked. A lot of players kind of need to be dropped as well, because it looks like absolute dog shit right now. Another one, but there's a lot of excuses right now in terms of, this player's not playing well, this player's not playing well. There's a lot not playing well. Zane Harrison, again, despite in a losing effort, obviously showed up pretty well in many regards in the team. It's one of those things where I hope that he just continues playing well, because if we get into a situation and getting on a winning run, possibly a couple of wins out of him, he's throwing up a lot of opportunities for us to score as well, especially even last game against the Roosters as well, that obviously didn't stick. One that did obviously stick, but a few that didn't stick in many regards in that game in particular. But they threw up a lot. Obviously, the time like Zane Harrison. So I hope to God that he plays well and continues to play well and keeps getting picked in the side because I know we're struggling right now and maybe need like an Ilias in there somewhere. I don't know. I don't know what the circuit breaker is. We just need our forwards to perform. Bo Firma is dropping the ball a lot again, making a lot of errors, and possibly needs to be dropped. And it even said on the radio as I was listening to this on the radio. You look at the form that he had last year. He went into an Origin debut season last year in Origin 1, debuted there, and 12 months later, he's nowhere near the radar at all when it comes to the Origin side. I don't think he was even picked for it, and that's disappointing in terms of him because obviously we've had some really good players, and he's been one of our best players when he hasn't been injured the last couple of seasons. And yeah, he's not even in the Origin side this year, and makes sense as to why because he's not playing that well at all. And it's very disappointing, especially with obviously Magic Round. They brought back obviously the Gold Coast Chargers jersey as a retrofit jersey that they wore for this game in particular. So it was very much obviously the Titans jersey, but in the style and colours of the old Chargers jersey. And ultimately at this stage, whenever they put that up for sale, and I do have the money to get them, I wanted to get one. I will get one because it might not look like the best jersey at all in terms of obviously the striking colours, but it looks pretty cool to me, and obviously it's a piece of history as well. With obviously being a side that obviously was from the Gold Coast previously, before obviously the Titans obviously is now the permanent fixture at the Gold Coast right now. Obviously, next game is against the Sea Eagles, away from home, obviously at 4 Pines Park. So we're playing in Manly, and yeah, Manly are on a tear. They're in the top 4 right now, and actually we'll go over the table as well. Penrith on top with 20 points. They didn't absolutely blow out the Dragons, which I thought they would have. They did win by like 20 plus points, but the Dragons played a lot better than I thought they would have. I think they did get beaten by 22, I believe, but ultimately it could have been a whole of a lot more. And honestly, the Dragons could have been on the board a few more times, if not for the defence in some parts to Penrith. Obviously, some errors as well from the Dragons, but it could have been a hell of a lot less than 22 being the margin. Warriors absolutely trounced the Broncos, so they moved to second position, 18 points. Third position is the Roosters. They lost obviously to the Cowboys, and Manly obviously in the top 4. They obviously trounced the Tigers, so they move up to 14. Souths dropped to 5th, also on 14 points. Obviously, for and against obviously being worse. And they have an interesting fixture next week because they play the Cowboys as well, so that's going to be interesting in terms of that. Newcastle in 6th position, obviously with that win over the Titans and a big one at that. Held there for and against as well. Big movers, especially because they've won 3 games on the trot, I believe, so doing really well. North Queensland also on 14 and 7th, and then rounding out the top 8 is the Dolphins with 12. Then Cronulla move up to 9th position, also on 12 points, and the Tigers obviously dropping a few games, also on 12 points, has dropped to 10th. Brisbane stay in 11th position with 10 points. Canberra obviously having the bye, so they stay where they are in 12th position. 13th position is Melbourne. They move up, obviously with a win. They move to 8 points. The Bulldogs drop into the bottom 4 with 8 points as well. Obviously, not a great result for them. They just keep sliding down the ladder. Parramatta dropped to 15th position. They're also on 8 points. Gold Coast on 6 points in 16th, and obviously with the 2 points obviously from the bye from last week was St George Illawarra Dragons. But yeah, obviously, game against the Seagulls. Who knows what will happen with that? It's probably going to be another blowout, but obviously, some of the teams, obviously with Origin being around, some of the teams are going to, the look up of the teams is going to look a little bit different. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see what Josh Hannay brings to the table in terms of picks, in terms of this tide. But yeah, not a great result at all from the Titans. Pretty average performance, obviously, from them, but keep getting that consistently. It's just one of those things, I swear, that this team is cursed in a lot of forms of fashion. But yeah, 36 points to 12, the Knights over the Titans. And now I just don't even know where to start with this one. Obviously, you know what's left. We haven't talked about the Giants yet. And ultimately, it was a loss in the West against West Coast. West Coast won by 17 points. Now, obviously, credit where credit is due to the West Coast Eagles. Obviously, they played relatively well. They kept in the fight pretty much the entire game. They led a lot of the game as well. So obviously going to give credit where credit is due to them for obviously not giving up, getting into a situation thinking this is a game that they could have won, and obviously went out and won it, and put pressure on, especially in the second quarter as well. Obviously, we'll talk about that. We're going to give credit where credit is due, obviously, to them. As for the Giants, what the absolute fuck? Like, what the fuck? I understand we're under a lot of pressure. We've got injuries in a lot of key factors. Obviously, Tom Green, obviously, is one of the big notable ones, but obviously Josh Kelly's out, Darcy Jones is out, obviously Jesse Hogan was out for this game, as I thought they were probably going to rest him for the trip to the West. Obviously, we'll probably have him back possibly next week if he isn't properly injured, because obviously having him in travel in terms of obviously not playing against Essendon last week, in terms of the fixture against the Bombers at home, kind of expected that if he wasn't properly injured, that he'd probably play against the Lions, obviously when they're at home at NG this coming week. And I thought he might not make the trip to the West, and obviously he didn't. But this performance has been really, really, really awful for the Giants. In terms of obviously, the only thing that obviously was notable about it was obviously the third quarter. We'll get to that. But in terms of the way that the game fell, it was 2-6 to the Giants in the first quarter compared to 1-2. So that means it was 8 scoring shots to 3. And we're only in front by, I believe, 9 points. Because it was, 8 compared to 12, 18. So we're in front by 10 points at the end of the first quarter, despite having the majority of the scoring shots, 8 shots to 3, in front of goal. And we're only in front by 10 points. Then West Coast went on a tear, 6-2 in the second quarter. Compared to 2-2 for the Giants in the second. So they led as high as 14 points at the half. So I thought, I was a little bit nervous, obviously, at work when this game was going on. Did catch a little glimpse of at the end of the first quarter. Obviously, as I was on my break at that point in time, I thought 14 points, probably not unassailable. Maybe they might turn it on in the second half, and they did. It was 5-2 in the third quarter for the Giants compared to 2-2 for the Eagles. So they did swing it back. Obviously, the West Coast Eagles kicked a couple late in the third quarter to get it back to a respectable number. And then obviously they shot with 4 in the last quarter compared to 1 for the Giants in the last. So ultimately they lose by 17 points. Disposal efficiency 65.4% for the Giants compared to 74.7% for the West Coast Eagles. A lot of free kicks, 26-10 in the favour of West Coast. So it kind of was a little bit. There's a few calls that did go against us that were a bit like, okay, it's a bit one of those things where it's like, okay, that shouldn't have happened. But in terms of it, in terms of goal scorers for the Giants. In particular, Brent Daniels top scored with Max Grueski with 2. Jake Stringer 2 goals 3. Though there was a couple of rushed like a couple of behinds that probably Jake Stringer probably should have went and kicked the goal, and that could have come back in our favour. Toby Bedford scored one. Joe Fonte scored one. Fonte, I believe it might have been one of his first games back. Oliver kicked one. Not Clayton. Believe he was the debutant. And Harry Thomas also scored one as well. Cadman got a behind. Phoenix Goddard got behind. Toby Green got a behind. Clayton Oliver got a behind. But that probably should have been a goal as well. So you look at that. That's two maybe from Jake Stringer out of the three behinds that he got. Clayton Oliver's goal, which realistically from the way he actually kicked it from, should have been realistically put a shot on goal and not been as wide. And there's probably couple other scores, maybe Aaron Cadman's behind as well as Toby Green's. Maybe there could have been goals and it could have flipped the other way. But pretty lackluster performance, obviously, for the Giants. Really needed to win this one as well, compared to obviously winning, yes, against Essendon, obviously last week was great. Great result in terms of that. Obviously wasn't as big of a win as I thought it probably should have been in terms of it being 14 points. But obviously we needed to win that game because we got some really, really tough games coming up, especially with the rest of the month of May. But ultimately, yes, we had the bye in the first week of June, but the games we got left, we're at home against the Brisbane Lions next Sunday coming. So that's going to be a huge game. Obviously, that might be and considering that Brisbane also are coming off a loss as well, it's not an ideal situation for the Giants to play them right now. And then obviously we play in the top end in Alice Springs against, it says it's Nam still, but obviously will be Melbourne on Sunday. I believe that's the big game on Sunday, obviously in the top end at Alice Springs. So who knows when it comes to that game in particular. But holy Jesus, this is a game that we should have won and we didn't. And realistically, they had a lot of pressure because there was a lot of teams that we could have put pressure on. We could have put pressure on the Western Bulldogs. Obviously, they would have been in front of us in terms of win, as well as obviously a lot of other teams. But we could have even jumped into possibly even 10th position with a win over the West Coast Eagles here, and possibly putting even pressure on 9th position, which obviously is the Saints right now. It's obviously would have been percentage, which we would have had to win by a decent amount to put a lot of pressure on. But as for the table, Sydney Swans on top. Obviously that percentage boost really helps. Wyalup is in second, obviously Fremantle. They did get a big win, obviously, in their last game in particular. But obviously it's just percentage that obviously difference between the top two sides right now. 2 games in front of Geelong in third and the Gold Coast in fourth, with obviously Melbourne being in 5th position after wins as well, all 3 sides getting wins. Hawthorn obviously losing to Melbourne. They dropped to 6th position, obviously with 26 points, so they have that little 2-point buffer, obviously, with that draw with Collingwood a couple of weeks ago. Brisbane dropped to 7th on 24, and Adelaide runs out the top 8. We're also on 24 points. And then obviously, as I said, Saints in 9th and Western Bulldogs in 10th with 20. Collingwood in 11th, and with obviously that big loss with 18 points. North Melbourne, again, got absolutely catered to by Adelaide, sitting in 12th position with 16 points in front of us by percentage. Obviously, we're in 13th. Port Adelaide in 14th with 12. Then obviously 15th is West Coast Eagles, also with 12 points. Just that percentage for them especially is really hurting the West Coast Eagles right now, because they could be in 14th. They could be jumping up in that position as well, and jumping out of the bottom 4. Carlton obviously got a win unexpectedly, obviously against the Bulldogs, so it was a big chance for us to jump the Western Bulldogs, but obviously didn't do so. Then Essendon in 17th position with 4, and obviously Richmond also on 4 points in last position. After a decent game against the Saints, but obviously still a loss for them. It's going to be interesting because this week coming up, both Essendon and Richmond play in Dreamtime at the G, so it'll be 17th versus 18th, with Richmond being under a little bit of pressure with a couple of injuries as well going into that game. But yeah, big notable game, obviously, against the Premiers at home at NG. Yeah, who knows? I don't know if I'll be going to that game in particular. I haven't sorted out my membership in general, and I'm a bit, not surprised in terms of that. Obviously, my birthday during the middle of this week, so we'll see what happens. I might buy some tickets. Who knows with that? But I need to get to a game at some point this year because I haven't done so in terms of the Giants this year. And yeah, maybe they could win. Obviously, Jesse Hogan, we don't know if he'll be back yet or not. But in terms of the list, we'll see what happens. But they haven't got the lineups yet, I don't think. It's because obviously with the players that we got right now, yes, Darcy Jones is injured, Tom Green is injured, Sam Taylor is obviously injured as well, Lee Collier is also injured, Jesse Hogan's also on that list, but I possibly could be back as early as this week. Josh Kelly obviously being out, Harry Ralston being out, Cody Angrove is out. I think he's still out with concussion. Xavier Halloran's obviously in there, Logan Smith's in there, Nicholas Madden's in there, and Nathan Wardius is also in there. So there's a lot of people being injured on that team, especially with some being very big injuries. Obviously Tom Green being out for the season, Darcy Jones probably again late season for us, Sam Taylor I think he's in a couple of weeks, Lee Collier possibly the same, Josh Kelly probably towards the end of the season, like I said with Jesse Hogan possibly as early as this week coming back, Harry Ralston I think it's a few weeks away, Cody should be back, I think it was concussion I believe, if he isn't injured with anything else, could be back soon. Xavier Halloran, who knows with him. Nicholas Madden, I think, is out for another couple of weeks as well. So we've got a lot of pressure going on to us into this game against the Lions. So hopefully we can turn some results around and have a better result in terms of it. But we'll see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but hopefully they can come away with a win. I doubt, obviously, against the next two sides going into the bye. I think it might be another 2 losses as well. So we'll see where we're sitting. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting in the bottom 4 again after the next 2 games as well. Because, it's just one of those things where percentage is really going to hurt us, and especially if we're trying to fight into the top 10, percentage is going to be a big talking point, and obviously we're not at that point right now. We need wins on the board for sure, but we've been very average. But credit where credit is due again, like I said, to the West Coast Eagles, 17-point win over the Giants in the West. And that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team. Obviously got a few things to talk about. I'm going to try and make this miscellaneous segment a little bit shorter than the last couple of weeks. In terms of obviously going with the A-League first, we'll go with the men's second leg of the semi-finals. In terms of semi-finals, Auckland FC won 3-0 in their second leg, so they obviously went through on aggregate. In terms of why did that disappear? We just said it wouldn't have done that. I'm trying to bring it up again. No, that's the wrong one. Don't know why it reloaded. After 1-1, obviously in that first game against Auckland and Adelaide, so 4-1 on aggregate in terms of Auckland's favour. Obviously 1-1 in aggregate in terms of Sydney FC and Newcastle Jets going into this game. It was 1-1 at full time. It was 1-1 at extra time. Although, we'll say, should have been 1-0 a win for Sydney FC. Until Eli Adams scored in the 6th minute of stoppage time to tie it up at 1 at the end of full time. So that was great against Sydney FC there. So it went to penalties, and Sydney FC won 4-2 on penalties. So grand final will be played in New Zealand. Will be played in New Zealand for the first time, possibly ever, at this point in time, because obviously Auckland finished higher than Sydney FC. So Auckland versus Sydney in the grand final. Auckland obviously finishing in third, Sydney FC finishing in fifth. So yeah, pretty weird in terms of grand final for that, but obviously, both teams have probably earned it at this point in time. As for the women, obviously grand final was on their cards. Obviously Melbourne City playing at home against Wellington Phoenix. Wellington obviously playing their first grand final ever in terms of the women's team. As for the men's, I think they might have made it once. But obviously, big pressure, first versus second. And it was 3-1 win for Melbourne City, which makes them premiers and also champions of the A-League Women's competition. There's a few shots from Wellington, and actually from both teams, but a lot more from Wellington that did go awry as well. But all credit to Melbourne City. They put the pressure on relatively early. I think it was at least 2-0 at halftime, if not 3-0. It was 2-0 at halftime. Then obviously they scored the third couple of minutes after the start of the second half, and the 49th minute was the third goal. They got one. Wellington got one back in the 52nd minute, but obviously the pressure was on from Melbourne City, and their defence was relatively well played in that. So obviously Melbourne City winning the women's competition. As for the men's, obviously we'll see what happens. Auckland obviously against Sydney. In terms of that's the women's. In terms of Liverpool, obviously dropped to 5th position. There's a few table changes as well. But obviously all the games have not been played yet. Arsenal obviously haven't played yet. Melbourne City obviously don't play until Wednesday, my time. So they won't play until well after this episode goes up. Arsenal, I think, play tonight, tomorrow morning as well against Burnley. But they're on top still. Man City is still in second. Man United won against Nottingham Forest, so they confirmed third spot in general. Going into obviously the last game, because they've got a 6-point lead over Aston Villa. So no matter what the result is going to be, Man United will be in third position. Aston Villa are obviously in 4th position still. Obviously with the win over Liverpool, Liverpool dropped to 5th position. Bournemouth still with a game in hand, are still in 6th position. Brighton move up to 7th. Obviously Brighton and Brentford obviously kind of struggling with results this morning. A couple of them have been draws, some of them have been losses as well. Sunderland at the moment move up to 9th position with a win. So they move up to 51 points, 1 point behind Brentford, but obviously Chelsea has still got to play obviously against Tottenham, obviously on Tuesday my time, so tomorrow morning as well. Newcastle jumped to 11th position with a win. We'll get to that in a second on who they won over. Everton drop because they kind of butchered a situation where a lot of other teams kind of around them, they kind of faltered a little bit. Fulham also dropped to 13th position. Leeds also won, so they stay in 14th position, but are now 2 points behind Fulham at this point on 47 points. Crystal Palace in 15th still. Nottingham Forest in 16th. Tottenham, obviously with the game in hand, obviously in 17th position, which means that yes, West Ham also are in the relegation zone still after losing 3-1 to Newcastle. So 2 points separating West Ham from Spurs. Obviously Spurs have got to play Chelsea. Obviously Chelsea Chelsea play on Wednesday, my time, because obviously they play the same day as Manchester City, obviously with the FA Cup final being over the weekend, which obviously Manchester City won. They won 1-0. So domestic double, obviously for Manchester City, with a chance obviously to still at this point win the Premier League, but obviously results are kind of got to go their way for them to do that. But they've also got to win against Bournemouth in a very, very tough game. So we'll see what happens. But West Ham, yes, as I said, 18th position, still 2 points adrift in the relegation zone from Tottenham. So if Tottenham do win, West Ham are relegated. If Spurs draw, it's going to go to a situation where West Ham have obviously got to win their last game, and who knows what will happen. Obviously, Burnley in 19th position, obviously on 21 points, and Wolves ended up picking up a draw as well in their game. So they end up going on 19 points now, 2 points behind Burnley at this point in time. And Wolves have actually got Burnley in the last round as well. So obviously West Ham have actually got to win against Leeds no matter what. If they win, obviously they've got to jump. If Spurs, they got to hope that Spurs lose both against Chelsea and in their last game of the season as well. Because if they draw, then West Ham are relegated. Because at this point in time, it'll be goal difference and Spurs would have to lose in their last game, or obviously this game against Chelsea by a decent chunk. They'd have to lose both of them, obviously. But geez, it's not ideal for West Ham. They are right on the edge of relegation right now, and Tottenham, if they do get a win, and even like a draw at this point in time, especially against Chelsea. Obviously Chelsea being obviously a Big Six club, another Big Six club clash, and obviously coming off an FA Cup final loss, a lot of pressure is on Chelsea, but Chelsea, credit to them if they perform against Tottenham, but West Ham are obviously hoping they lose both games for Tottenham, and obviously win on the final day against Leeds to jump obviously out of the relegation zone and put Tottenham back in to that spot. Obviously Liverpool against Brentford, we know at home at Anfield, obviously for a spot for the Champions League right now, and hopefully that we can win. Aston Villa have got Manchester City in the last day of the season, so if Man City are going to try and fight for this title, they're hoping that they win both against Bournemouth on Wednesday, and obviously play relatively well against Aston Villa. Obviously, Villa will be on their way to looking for a Europa League final win to win the Europa League, I believe midweek. So we'll see what happens with that. Crystal Palace obviously got the Conference League as well, but they obviously go up against Arsenal in the last day of the season as well. So we'll see what happens with all of that. Huge struggle for a lot of these teams. Then we'll go over the Cubs. Obviously, we've got a few results obviously to talk about. Don't really want to get into today's result, but I will have to. But obviously, we don't have the situation with the Brewers series yet. That's not until tomorrow. It's one of those things where this week has been very, very interesting in terms of games, because obviously we went up against the Braves in Atlanta. Was always going to be a struggle there, and then obviously playing the White Sox, technically away from home, obviously playing in the White Sox Stadium instead of Wrigley Field, but obviously playing in Chicago. So obviously with Atlanta, obviously we lost the series to the Texas Rangers. Obviously got shut out both in consecutive games. Obviously lost 4 on the trot with Atlanta. Obviously 5-2 in the first game, and then lost 4-1 in the second game. So we obviously lost the series in the first 2 games against Atlanta. But we did get a shutout win against Atlanta in the third game, 2-0. So that was great in terms of finishing off. But we didn't get that many hits in that series in terms of the last 2 games against Atlanta. So that wasn't ideal. Then we kind of put on a heater against the White Sox, 10-5 in the first game. So we did win 2 games back to back. Then it was an 8-3 loss yesterday. And then the notable result this morning after, like, obviously, we'll say yesterday, they gave up 6 runs in the first few innings. And obviously, our starting pitcher is to blame for that. 3 runs in the first, 2 runs in the second, 2 runs in the third, 2 runs in the fifth, including 6 homers in that game as well. We did obviously ration out to 1 run in the sixth, but yeah, just not great in terms of that. And obviously results today, we went up, we're up a couple of runs in front of the Sox. I think it was 4 runs to 1. They got it back to 4. They got in front with 7 runs to 4 or 5. Then Michael Conforto hits a 3-run home run in the top of the 9th inning to tie it at 7. Went to extra innings as well in the game today. Dansby Swanson scored at the top of the 10th, so it was 1 run. And then obviously switching in pitcher Palencia obviously was in after having an injury, was only in for 2/3 of an inning, got subbed out for Rollinson, and he throws a pitch straight in the middle and the guy hits a 2-run home run to walk it off for the White Sox 9-8, with a White Sox win, a series win over the Cubs in the first leg of obviously the crosstown rivalry there, obviously Chicago versus Chicago. So not ideal. Realistically, they should have been a series win for the Cubs. Did get a few hits obviously today. Just keep leaving people on base as well. Like pitching is not doing great right now. Obviously the bullpen kind of messed it up against the Atlanta Braves as well. But we're leaving people on base when we're getting hits, especially the last couple of games. Having 11 runs to 17 in the last 2 games, obviously 10 runs to 5 in the first game. So realistically, they're looking at 22 runs for the White Sox, and 10, 8, 18, and 21 to the Cubs. So yeah, not great in terms of that. Obviously, a couple of runs lost, but obviously big week again, and it's probably even a bigger week in terms of obviously our division more so than outside of that this week, because obviously play tomorrow, play a 3-game series against Milwaukee at home at Wrigley Field. Obviously, the Brewers come in with a little bit of heater. They've lost a couple of games here and there, but have won more games that they've lost in the last 10 or 12. Then we have the day off. Then we play at home against the Astros. Obviously finishing off the week on that. Then obviously heading over to Pittsburgh to play against Pittsburgh in a 4-game series there before playing 3 games obviously in St. Louis against the Cardinals. So we've got 3 rivalry series in the next 4 to finish off the end of May, and obviously just start the month of June. Obviously that last game falling on the 1st. So yeah, it's going to be very, very vital, because obviously in the standings right now, we're only in front by a game and a half in terms of the Central Division, with Pittsburgh and Cincinnati being 5 games behind in terms of the lead. Obviously, in terms of the wildcard spots right now, yes, we've dropped from 2nd to 3rd, obviously with the Dodgers sweeping the Angels today. Kind of not helping. But obviously San Diego are out by half a game at this point in time. And Milwaukee are on the same amount, I believe, not the same. And Pittsburgh, and I say plus, it's half a game, but it's only because obviously the Dodgers have won 2 more games than the Padres right now, but obviously the Padres have lost the same amount as the Dodgers right now, so that's why they're sitting outside in the 4th spot in the wild card race. Pittsburgh are 3.5 games out, as well as the Phillies. Obviously, the Phillies got a little bit of heater as well, and the Cincinnati Reds are 3.5 games behind in terms of the National League division and wild card spots. In terms of the American League, Tampa Bay still in front. They're still on top. Cleveland still in second, and the Athletics are in third. The Yankees, after going up in the first game against the Mets, actually lost the series. They lost the next 2 games, so they're 5.5 games in to the wild card spot. So I believe actually this might be 5.5 games in front of the next teams to drop out, I believe is what it is. So that's how far away it is. And then obviously the White Sox jump into the 5th position with a series win, and then obviously the Texas Rangers in 6th with half a game out from the Seattle Mariners, 1 game out for the Blue Jays, and then a game and a half for the Orioles and Twins. And it's funny because if you look down towards the bottom of the league on the American League side, the LA Angels are out 6.5 games of the wild card spot. And now if you're looking at the National League, the Mets obviously jumped from the bottom. The Colorado Rockies are on the bottom now, and then obviously the Giants, then the Mets. The Rockies are behind by 9.5 games. San Francisco 7.5, and 7 games obviously to the Mets. So obviously all those teams are well outside, and obviously Miami the same amount of games behind in terms of the wild card race as the Angels, who are on the bottom of the American League. So that's how close it is in terms of the American League right now, in terms of their division and their league. Because, yeah, it's going to be massive in terms of the National League. But, yeah, very important for the Cubs to try and sweep the series, hopefully, against Milwaukee. If not, obviously, win 2 games out of 3. I would hope they win 2 games out of 3, obviously. Then Houston, obviously, not doing fantastic right now. Would hope that we can win against them as well, because they're sitting second last in the American League right now. So, ultimately, we need to kind of sweep them at home. I hope that they do, the Cubs, because obviously 4 games in Pittsburgh, 3 games in St. Louis before our next break. Obviously the first break will happen after that Milwaukee series, which will be on the Friday for me, but we'll see what happens with that. But not ideal going down the last two series. Obviously one against the Braves, which I kind of expected a little bit. Was hoping maybe they get 2 wins, 1 loss in terms of that series to kind of put pressure on Atlanta. But obviously 1 win from 2 games in that kind of makes a little bit of sense. Obviously losing the series against the Rangers and the White Sox 2-1 in both of those instances is probably the thing that hurts us the most, especially after sweeping the Cincinnati Reds and getting a couple of sweeps with that, and obviously the Diamondbacks before that. But just need to hit smart, get runners off base and score, and hopefully the pitchers can come in as well. But with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 100. You guys have a great night, of course. Take care.